Good afternoon, and welcome to our sort of first lesson on Shakespeare, Shakespeare's Macbeth. We're looking at Act 1, Scene 1. I'll talk a little bit about that, and then maybe we should look at kind of adding to the forum. The forum's pretty straightforward. You just kind of, add to it and put in your comments. So hopefully most of you will do that, and that will be something that you can reflect on later on in the year. Act 1, Scene 1 is very, very important. Obviously, it's the opening of the play, and the opening of the play has to kind of set the scene. So this is, in a sense, Shakespeare setting the scene for what happens throughout the play. So he's got to do that really, really quickly, and he does this really, really effectively. It's quite easy to brush over this, but there's quite a few things in here that are worth looking at, in a sense. One of the key things that the background to this, in a sense, is that Scotland is at war with Norway. The Norwegians have invaded, and King Duncan, the Scottish king, is obviously having to fight back. But the problem is that he can't trust his noblemen, the Thanes. He can't trust them. And so he's in a position where he has to kind of fight, obviously, the invader, but also factions within his own kind of hierarchy that may kind of profit from his downfall. And this is the sort of background. So he in a way, he's kind of like he's fighting on two levels. And this is the sort of background, because the Norwegians, what they'll do, they'll be happy to basically pay off or bribe people who will then betray King Duncan. And the way they do that is they give them lands and titles and things like that they have. So in a way, the Thanes will turn, obviously, to kind of remain in a position of power. And if they go against, obviously, the Norwegians and the invaders and they win, well, they'll be executed or, carted off or whatever. So again, Act 1, Scene 1, we kind of set the scene in a sense. It's a deserted place, thunder and lightning. So we get this sense of pathetic fallacy. Pathetic fallacy being how the kind of the external elements are reflecting the mood of the play. And this kind of like a distorted sort of dark and miserable kind of almost violent sort of situation we've got in this place that where no one is around. And we've got the witches. Now the witches, when they enter, will look pretty much, not like we would expect, but they would have certain things that they would have worn that the Elizabethan Jacobean audiences would have understood as to be witches. And immediately the audience would have been kind of on edge to kind of say, right, well, wow, okay, we're starting off with these witches, hold on a second. Isn't this play about a guy called Macbeth? Yeah, because he's the titular character. Isn't something going to happen here with regards to Macbeth? And we finally find Macbeth down on line 8. Okay, when the third witch says they're to meet with Macbeth. All right. Again, kind of referring back to the kind of the war that's happening between Norway and Scotland, we've got this idea, the hurly-burly. Okay, when the war is finished, the hurly-burly, and the battle's lost and won. And we get that kind of paradox that with every failure there's a win, and with every win there's a failure, a loss. And we get that sort of that two sides of the different coin. That life is fragile. That things can quickly turn. And so, in a way, they're kind of planning. They kind of got this plan where they're going to meet Macbeth. And in a way, this is really interesting because, in a sense, it's almost like a conspiracy. They're conspiring, all right? And then at the end, they have this little chant, fair is foul and foul is fair, hogger through the fog and filthy air. And coming back to this idea of fair is foul and foul is fair, it's a sort of paradoxical kind of statement, but it's also like an equivocation. It's like it's ambiguous, and in a way, Macbeth himself is an ambiguous character, and it's an ambiguous scene. Is this good or bad? We don't know. In a way, it's kind of Shakespeare's purpose. He's perfect. He needs to hook his audience into this idea that this is worth watching. And immediately he grabs them. He's got all those elements of like the Gothic horror story. You've got the wind and the rain and the lightning, and then we've got kind of like witches and evil, and then we've got the titular character Macbeth who appears, and they don't seem to say much. But I want you to point out something that's really, really important here. And let's look at that, referring back to the lesson I got you to look at with the TED Talk about meter. Meter's very important here. Okay, notice, when shall we three meet again, in thunder, lightning, or in rain? When the hurly-burly's done, when the battle's lost and won. Now, obviously, my croaky, horrible voice will not kind of do the poetic justice of what this is, but what you're hearing there, in a sense, is trochaic meter. It's a trochee, okay? Now, what's the significance of that? Well, if you've followed the lesson, you'll know that a trochee, in a sense, is the opposite of an iamb. Now, an iamb is that unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. With trochee, you've got the stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed. And so you get the reverse of that. Now, just for a moment, I want you to consider, okay, what iamb is. An iamb, in a sense, is that suprasensual rhythm meter that basically imitates the human heart. Now, what we've got here, if iamb imitates the human heart, and it's that idea of humanity and that beating of the heart, what would trochee then be? If iamb is natural, then, in a sense, the trochee would be unnatural or supernatural. And so we get this immediately, and the audience, obviously, the audience would have been people who had gone to the theatre for many years and would be basically well versed in iambic pentameter. Shakespeare wrote an iambic pentameter, but everyone did. Iambic pentameter, or the iambic meter, was first, in a sense, written by Geoffrey Chaucer when he wrote the Canterbury Tales. So, in a sense, he's the grandfather of English literature, the first person to ever write a literature. And so we get this lovely idea of how Shakespeare puts together the unnatural setting. It's that the place, the deserted place, the fact that we've got three witches that are kind of come together to conspire, and then we've got the unnatural rhythm of how they speak, and that sets the tone for the coming play. And then we've got the idea of Macbeth, and people start to wonder, what the hell is going on? I need to pick up and pay attention. Thank you.